discussing, as you all know, Ruby, Python, and PHP. Potentially which one's better, which one's, well, we'll get all into the heat of the argument in a few minutes. But I want to introduce the panel. Starting first, we got Bryan, who will be the Python supporter. Second, we have Andre Dublin, who is for PHP. And then last, we have Thomas Macklin, who will be arguing in favor of Ruby. To lead this heated discussion, we've got Chad Cravens of Open Source Systems. He will be your Brian Williams of the morning and directing the panelists. But to get started, we have a little educational video to introduce you all to Ruby, Python, and PHP. And enjoy.
Is it the... Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm PHP.
Hi, I'm Python.
Hey guys,
Wait,
That is so
who are you?
unfair.
Yeah, who's this?
I'm Ruby.
Hey, a new girl.
Wait a minute. When did you show up? And what's with all the funny clothes?
Well, these are my gems. People give me all sorts of neat stuff to work with.
So people just give you this stuff?
Yeah, isn't it awesome?
But you just got here. You can't look cooler than us.
Please, I'm more object-oriented than you. And I'm quickly becoming more popular than you.
Now, who the hell is this?
Oh, me? I'm Java. I'm for better multi-platform support. I'm more object-oriented and I'm easy to learn, scalable, and secure.
But can you offer a really cool framework like Rails that has ORM so I don't have to write stupid SQL like PHP does?
Hey, I'm not stupid.
You're all stupid. I've been around longer than all of you.
I'm not stupid. I was taken over by a very powerful company.
Hey guys. Now, who the hell is this guy?
Oh, me. I'm .NET.
Unlike .NET, over there, I don't limit you to just developing in Windows.
Shut up.
Dude, don't be interpolating my blouse now.
I have a lot more to offer and I'm very easy to learn. I'm based on solid languages like C and that's why other languages copy stuff off of me all the time.
Your breath stinks. Anybody interested in buying some licensing from me? For incredibly high prices and horrible outsourced support from people who can't even speak English.
Why, you can get that from PHP for free.
Now, who the heck is this? How many programming languages can we fit in here?
Menos programming, señor. Menos. Do you know where I español?
Haha. She's got a funny accent, that one.
What's your good name, señor?
We don't speak the same language.
Mr. Matthew.
Don't touch me.
Hey, you touched me first.
Cool, guys. Alright, well, I guess it starts that event. So you want to go ahead and just introduce the moms? Alright, so good morning everybody. This is the Python, PHP, Ruby throwdown. Here we have Bryan with Sign Labs, Andre Dublin with
Kid Studios?
Yep, Kid Studios, and then Thomas, what's your last name? Macklin, sorry, with
George Consulting.
George Consulting. Okay, Thomas Macklin, George Consulting. So these are panelists. Joe is going to be doing Python. Andre is our PHP guy, and then Thomas is going to be doing Ruby. So what they did was they had an assignment sent to them earlier this week to demonstrate the capabilities of their specific language. So what we did was we told them to generate a palindrome detector. So I don't know, do you guys know what who knows what a palindrome is? Amanda does. I would assume that, yeah. Every CS student is going to know what a palindrome is, but anybody else? No? Okay, so a palindrome is a sentence that is spelled the same backwards as it is forwards. So, for example, you can look here for palindrome examples, just Google, and a popular one, well, stressed or desserts, rewarder or redrawer. So you can see that if you look at backwards or forwards, it's spelled the same. And there's actually some really long sentences that are palindromes as well that are well known. So we're going to use their source code and put it to the test to make sure that it can properly detect the palindromes, and then each panelist is going to discuss the ways that they were able to tackle this problem in their specific programming language. So for example, there's a lot of languages that offer the ability to work with strings. So we're passing strings into their source code, and it's the way that these languages are designed to work with lists and iterators and things like that. So that's what we want to present today, and kind of discuss what essentially for a developer is easier to work with now that you have these tools at your disposal. Libraries that you can use that are just kind of embedded with the language, the way that the language is structured and designed, etc. So that's what we'll be doing. And I guess we can start with Joe. Does that sound good?
So you want me to talk about Python in general?
Yeah. What is that?
Or you want me to talk about this?
Oh, Prolazek. Yeah. Let's talk about Prolazek.
So why don't you start with just a brief overview on Python?
Well, Python is the gray-headed man, I guess, in the group, in the sense that it was developed a year before Matt did Ruby. And when was PHP?
92.
So maybe PHP is older. But Python was invented by a guy named Guido van Rossum, who evidently you don't get rich inventing computer programming languages, because he's now like not the CEO of, but working for Dropbox. And still very much active in managing the community and the forward path and progress of Python. But Python was not and is not a web-specific language. It's a compiled language like all of the ones we're working with now that compiled down to C, and it is in my view a very syntactically elegant language. Coming from my background in programming languages, which range from an old database-specific language called Dataflex and BASIC and Pascal and JavaScript and .NET, C#, and things like that. It to me was just a terrific language in terms of its elegance and simplicity. And are you going to ask more questions? Should I save some of these nuggets for later?
Yeah, everything you want to explain, go ahead, and we'll look at the questions.
I think that's a general overview. It's not a web-specific language in and of itself, and it probably has been around the longest and still widely used, and has a very, very prolific and active community of developers contributing packages, not just to the core Python, but also to third-party packages.
Yeah. So that's Python, and then we'll go to PHP. You want to talk a little about PHP? What's the history? What's your motivation for really developing in it? And when did you start with it?
PHP was created by Ralph Smith Lidorf. Might be butchering his name. Does it give me? In 95. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. And he built it to be specifically to build his web page, like his personal home page, which was the original acronym for PHP. Now it's PHP Hypertext Preprocessor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. My decision to build with PHP was, I guess it was just really easy to get into. Like any shared host server that you pick up will have PHP on it, and you can start writing a website right away. That and one of my previous jobs had me doing a lot of WordPress, so a lot of PHP going on there. I like it, again, because it's simple to get started with, and there's really no barrier to entry for anybody at any level to get started with PHP, which is what I like about it, which can be kind of a double-edged sword because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you don't understand particular cases where you could have your database get destroyed or drop Bobby tables on your database. What's been going on now with PHP? It's been, I guess, over the past 5 years, it was kind of the whipping boy of the internet for a while. Now it seems to be everybody's looking at JavaScript, so that's kind of cool. What's nice, there's been kind of like this renaissance with PHP thanks to web frameworks and people writing great software for it, like Composer, Laravel, And I think packages is another one. So, yeah.
Nice, cool. Yeah, and I've got some more questions, so we'll hit on more specifics here soon. But I just kind of want a brief overview. So Thomas, tell us a little bit about Ruby. What are its capabilities? Because I know it also is, and I feel that Ruby has a huge group of essentially groupies, right? Who absolutely love their Ruby languages and all their little gems. So can you explain to everybody kind of why Ruby is so popular and especially so beloved with its group, and what are gems?
All right, so if you use Ubuntu, you're familiar with maybe packages where you do apt-get install and it installs stuff. If you use Macs, maybe you use brew to install packages so you don't have to worry about running make and installing dependencies. Gems are just a way of tracking dependencies and bundling stuff so that you don't have to worry about how to install it. You can just say gem install. If you're not a code hacker liking to build your own stuff and track your own dependencies, gem is just a package manager. And really Ruby this is one of my favorite Ruby stories, is Ruby was really held back, and one of the main complaints people had about it is it didn't have a CPAN. It didn't, like Perl does. We don't have a Perl person here, but it didn't have a package manager. And so RubyConf back in like 2003, it was the Ruby conference over the weekend, and a bunch of guys got together. Jim Wyrick, who recently passed away, led them, and Paul Brannon, who lives here in Charleston, worked on it. They got together and they said, we need a package manager, and they wrote Ruby gems at the conference. And that was really the enabler for people to use Ruby, because before that you had to know how to do all the installation. It was madness. So gems are simply just a package manager to make it easy to install Ruby. Since this is recorded, I'm not going to butcher Matt's name. He's Japanese, and you can look up the spelling yourself. But Mats is what we refer to him. He's our benevolent dictator. He defines the language. There are multiple implementations of Ruby. We usually, when people talk about Ruby, we talk about MRI, which is Matt's Ruby implementation, and that's the canonical Ruby. But there's also multiple spin-offs. There's Enterprise Ruby, there's JRuby that Charlie Nutter wrote, and I think there was Iron Ruby, which was a Microsoft implementation.
It's dead now.
It's dead. I was excited about it,
Me
but
too.
it didn't work out. And then there's Rubinius, which is a goal to write Ruby in Ruby, which is very cool. But so that's Ruby and what gems are.
I have to confess, I'm kind of a Ruby fanboy.
Oh.
Yeah.
But I didn't really answer your question. Ruby's fun. That's why people get excited, because if you're a coder and you write code in Ruby, it's fun and you get excited about it. Not coding.
So, Andre, you had mentioned that I guess PHP is a really easy language to get started with. We may have some people here who are interested in maybe dabbling into their first programming assignment. Do you think that that's going to be a good language to get started, and why over something like Ruby or Python should somebody get started in PHP?
Because you can, like I said, you can go to a shared host, or you can download a full stack package like MAMP or WAMP or XAMPP and just start writing PHP right away. There's not really a lot of setup to do with PHP that you have to do. Maybe it might be a different case now with Ruby.
Yeah.
In the beginning I know it was pretty tough. I'm not sure about Python, so I'm going to leave that alone. I don't want Joe to beat me up. That's how I feel about that, and I just feel like you just start typing and something happens right away. It's the I guess the REPL process, the read eval print loop, is a lot different from Ruby and Python. Is that you just open your web page and you can see your output right away. You don't have to have the IRB interpreter or a Python shell running in order to see output.
Nice. So so compared to Ruby and Python, PHP integrates better into the web server.
Correct.
So there's not essentially a script that you have to run
Correct.
and manage, right?
Yes.
Okay. So PHP is run every time the user essentially gets a web page, right?
Reads the web page, yep.
Okay. Which is actually not the case with Ruby and Python. It has to be run from the shell. Right?
If you want to do, like I said, the REPL, I know there's, with Ruby, you'd have to, upstream from like Apache server and Nginx to Ruby, via maybe Unicorn, or I'm not sure if Thor would allow you to do direct access to a Ruby code.
Well, Ruby, strictly speaking, yes. Rails was implemented as the web front end for Ruby,
right there.
And so if you run in development mode, if you're running Rails and you do script server, it starts up WebRick, which is the built-in web server, and you can make code changes and hit refresh and rebuild it. Now the performance is a dog, but that was one of the big things that got people excited about Rails, is you could just say script server start and boom.
Okay.
But then you've got to load Rails and go down the Sinatra Rails rack road.
So you talk about Rails, Thomas. Could you explain what Rails is?
I can try.
So is there a difference between Ruby and Ruby on Rails? So, 'cause
Absolutely.
Everybody kind of bundles the both together, right?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So Ruby's been around a long time, and I got into Ruby because it makes it really easy to bind C code. I'm a C programmer at heart, and it makes it really easy. Ruby has a really easy mechanism for binding C code into your Ruby code. And the Rails framework came out in 2005 and kind of exploited the funness of Ruby and took advantage of some side effects that it had to build a web framework. And so Ruby on Rails is a specialized framework that allows you to do things like, say, 2.seconds.ago, which is not part of the Ruby language, but it's just kind of fun. So Ruby on Rails is a framework to make writing web applications very simple, and it went viral because David Handmeyer Hansen, DHH, wrote a little web blog on YouTube and showed himself building a blog in like 5 minutes, and that was really compelling for a lot of people.
So Ruby can be used as a very kind of mature language, even for more than just web applications, right?
Oh yeah, I don't do very much web application programming. I use Ruby for other things.
Okay. And I know that there's some other products out there, I think. I know that Ruby is used a lot within the hacker community with a product called Metasploit.
Yep.
And so whether you want to write modules and payloads, you essentially write them in Ruby and then put them into the Metasploit framework, and that's how a lot of these people are hacking into computer systems.
Yeah. Well, Metasploit's pretty easy to detect. It's a good pen test tool, but that really emphasizes a good point of Ruby, which is it makes it really easy to write domain-specific languages. The fact that Rails is written in Ruby and that Metasploit's written in Ruby, two totally different problem sets, but it kind of illustrates the point that Ruby makes it easy to write your own framework.
Cool. Python. We'll pick on you for a little bit. I don't think that Python is really well known for being a web language, but I know that there are some frameworks and stuff for writing web applications in Python. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, everyone has heard of Ruby on Rails, and so if you want to have something equivocal to that in Python, it would be Python on Django. Django is the quintessential web framework for Python, although there are certainly others, as Rails has alternatives as well. Like Rails, Django is a fairly mature web framework that gives you a huge amount of built-in functionality that you would otherwise have to code yourself. And so as a result of that, there are slimmer versions of web frameworks that have been released in Python, and there are even versions of Python that come with their own web server, G-Unicorn and trying to think, PyFlakes is one of them. There's a number of packages that let you build for the web, but Django is the preeminent one. And in fact, I got into Python originally. I knew I was going to go open source, and at the time, because I was one of the haters of PHP, I only had a decision to make between Ruby and Python. And my impression of the Ruby group developers was that they were the pretty creative people, and I wanted to just get down and do a lot of coding. So I guess I kind of threw myself into the black and white group when I did that. But I did enough research. I got a book called Learning Python by O'Reilly, and it did enough in the first couple chapters to convince me that there were some performance benefits, that I liked the syntax, nature of Python more than I did on Ruby. And also the fact that Python was named after Monty Python, and Django was named after Django Reinhardt, and the guy that invented Python's name was Guido. All of those just kind of tipped the scale for me and made me decide to go that way. And Django was really just as mature as, arguably as mature as Rails was at the time. And in addition to that, Django had at the time a built-in, ready-made CRUD admin system that just came with Django for when you build your models. You can instantly, easily port them to a dashboard interface where you can log in and make changes to all of your models without having to create your own dashboard or your own backend. Rails has got a number of plugins now that lets you do, backend dashboards and CMSs and stuff on top of Rails. But at the time, Django had that built in, and that was a big appeal for me.
So speaking of performance, Andre, I know that a lot of really websites that we use every day, in particular, I think Facebook, was originally written in PHP on a LAMP stack or a WAMP stack or a MAMP stack or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it used MySQL for a database. It used PHP for the language. Facebook did.
Yeah.
But they actually ended up creating a PHP compiler that translated their PHP code to C so that they could compile it natively to make Facebook run faster. And I think the stats I read from Facebook said about 30% performance gains. Do you think that's a problem or something that people should take into consideration when working with PHP?
Yes. Mainly because optimizing PHP is not the easiest thing to do. It doesn't really lend itself, the code structures or the language, the way it's designed itself is not like, this is a high performance language. It's going to be, threaded and concurrent and all those good things that you get from maybe the JVM languages, something like that. But it's possible, using optimization caches or Xcache, APC caches, another one to cache already compiled code within that. So that's one, option to have. Speaking of Facebook, with it's the hip hop virtual machine. Like I was telling you, I was trying last night to run the code example on this, but it kept crashing. It's not really stable on Mac, so
okay.
I'll have to try it later on a Linux installation. Originally, it was compiling, which was really awesome, PHP to C++, and then they would have that compiled down to bytecode. Now, it does a PHP straight to bytecode, and then that gets JITted to run on your architecture right away. So that's definitely a performance speed increase for PHP. There's been a lot of, I guess, kind of like, what's going to happen with PHP now that this is here? Are they going to kind of take over like the direction of the language, or will it still be with the original maintainers? And it's kind of interesting to see how that's going to play out, because the way that they're, the original contributing team is, their way they're taking the language, it's kind of hard to tell what they want to do with it. Do they want to have it be, performance, or do they want to have more flexibility, or just kind of improve on the code base itself instead? While Facebook and the hip hop virtual machine, has taken PHP and given it this massive speed boost, still kind of kept the language the same. However, it gives you an option to write PHP as a more, I guess, strongly typed language, where you can use hints and identifiers to let your functions know what values are passing in and what values are you returning, like Java or C# or C++. And I'm just, I'm really excited to see how that plays out. I know that they're also working on, or they've kind of just, they might be dropping the PHP altogether, but they're working on another language called Hack, which I think is a terrible name, because when I'm trying to look up Hack on Google, like Hack function, it's just like nothing that I need. So
you mentioned the whole concept of a typeless language, right? And being able to essentially annotate your source code with information on what values to expect and what value it returns. Can you maybe talk a little bit about typed versus typeless languages?
Okay, yeah. So at work, we do C#. Hooray. Some people feel sad for me, but
Great language.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, since I've worked with it, it's really amazing. So I bridge the gap between our PHP websites and our C# backend a lot at work. So going back and forth between the two, it's given me a really good insight as to kind of what are the weaknesses of PHP sometimes, and type hinting and understanding what type or strongly typing languages is kind of a win, I think, especially if you have an IDE that's going to help you along the way, so you don't have to sit there and mentally think about what you're passing in, what you're returning. That helps to take that out of the equation. It makes it easier on yourself. With PHP, however, the flexibility can help you prototype or build your information system faster, because you don't have to worry about those kind of things. You just pass in, an int, and all of a sudden it's a string. But again, that can be dangerous. So what's nice in PHP 5.5 is, and maybe 5.6, but I do know, like I said, in the hip-hop virtual machine, there is type hinting when you're passing arguments to a function, which is nice. So,
can I make a comment on all that?
Absolutely.
What we're getting at is a really important thing, which is that if you want to learn optimization, it's best to learn a typed language at some point. So if you're just wanting to learn to write code to build websites, that's great. These dynamically typed languages make it very easy to do that. But if you're wanting a more serious industrialized career in software, I'd really recommend starting with a strongly typed language, because compilers teach you. The compiler knows.
Yeah.
It teaches you what you need to know, and if you've never worked with a compiler, you've never had that wonderful teacher that tells you why you can't do what you're trying to do. And then when you go back into the dynamically typed language, you feel the freedom, but you have the experience from your wonderful compiler teacher.
you think like, why did I do it this way?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, and that's absolutely an excellent point, and I think that's kind of a big thing, especially for people starting out, is kind of trying to decipher, a typed language versus, language that doesn't enforce that. So,
what does that mean? A strongly typed language?
So, for example, you would have a function, and let's just say, it's a multiply. It just takes a number, or returns the power of the number, right? So, you would pass in the argument of that function, but you'd have to let your compiler know, hey, this is an integer that I'm passing, and this also returns an integer. So at the beginning of the function, it would be prepended with the int keyword to know that this returns an int, and the argument that goes into the function would be prepended with the int keyword also, so that this takes an integer.
Or another way to put that would be, if you declare a variable x and set it equal to 0, it's an integer variable. And then in the next line, if you say x equals a string of my name, in PHP it'll say, okay, I'm now a string. In strongly typed languages, it will say, wait a second, I'm an integer object. You can't put a string in me.
Yeah.
So the x takes on the nature of the data it contains. It's a typed object.
Thank you.
So let's. So in that video before, one of them had mentioned the Ruby said that they have very good ORM support and essentially database integration. Can we maybe address that a little bit? Talk about. Database integration nowadays is just fundamental in almost every web app that's built. The databases that are rolling out now, it's been relational for many, many years, and now we're getting these NoSQL databases coming up, and we're getting these map-reduced, essentially databases and distributed databases in the cloud, and so that's kind of where the trend seems to be heading. But can you talk about maybe Ruby's integration with databases? Is it easy? Is it hard? Is it good? Is it fast?
Okay. Backing up just a moment, they were talking mostly about a lot of stuff that came out of Active Record, which is part of Rails and Sinatra and everything like that now. So strictly speaking, what they're referring to is not core Ruby. It's something you download to extend Ruby and turn it into something else. Ruby does have some database support built in, but really what she's talking about is Active Record and that vein of database plugin. The reason Ruby has good ORM support and database support is because it's able to exploit two of its strengths for that. One is that it's good at writing domain-specific languages, so you can use things like method missing to override the behavior, so that when you get code that asks you to do something, it can do a lot of stuff behind the scenes for you automatically. The other strength it has is it has really good C binding, native binding, so when something needs performance, all interpreters are slow compared to C. And so what it allows you to do is exploit the fact that there's a lot of really fast C code, write binding so that you can call your Ruby code and it passes your data into C, and then the back end performs very quickly.
Cool. And I guess maybe for Python as well, what kind of, does Python offer really good native database support? I know Java, for example, has something called JDBC, which comes standard in the Java library that you can use to essentially abstract different databases, right? So, I mean, what's the database integration like?
I don't believe Python core has any database implementation in it, aside from some very base sort of input-output classes. But every major database comes with easy to install packages, and Django in specific supports a number of different databases. Initially in only the SQL versions, but now there are numerous plugins that let you implement just as easily within the same Django framework. MongoDB or CouchDB or Redis or some of the others that don't support SQL. And there's also a plugin inside Django called South. Django's, I think, the latest version of Django is actually implementing its own version of migrations. The challenge with SQL databases is modifying the structure once you've created the database. And Django makes it easy for you to just insert a field, run a migration, push it up to the database and insert it. And it supports, I guess, PostgreSQL, MySQL. I believe it even supports SQL Server. And SQLite is the one that's built in by default. You can easily put up a database quickly. But now Mongo and Couch are easily supported. So if you're using a web framework especially, it's going to have multi-database options. But then there are individual database packages. If you just want to do straight Python and communicate with a DB, you don't have to have Django.
Okay, cool. Is there native database support for PHP?
Yes. PHP comes with a number of functions to communicate with a variety of databases natively in the library itself. There's MySQL library, there's MySQL I, which is MySQL improved, which you should be using over MySQL, and then what you should be using over MySQL I is the PHP data objects class that allows you to connect to a number of structured databases, which I use on a regular basis a lot. When it comes to ORMs, there's a number out there that are really good. One that I've particularly enjoyed using in the past is PHP Active Record, which actually a friend of mine back in Richmond had worked on a while, and I didn't even realize until I picked it up one time and I saw his commit, so I was like, wait a second. And then a couple frameworks come with their own ORMs. I won't go into too many of those, but the one that I've used frequently is Laravel's Eloquent ORM, which it's just pretty much like a copy of Active Record, basically.
Is Cake still around? Is Cake still?
Cake's still kicking, but it's just not my cup of tea. It's too auto-magic for me, honestly. I feel like I have to break a lot of things down in order to make something that I want to have happen. Doctrine. Oh yes, Doctrine. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot about that one. That's an old one. That's been around for a while. It's really good too.
Cool. Well, so we talked a little bit about performance, and I think we're up till 9:30. Okay, I'd like to try to go into the languages because I want to actually demonstrate every programming language so you can see it on the board and give our panelists the opportunity to talk about what they program. But I do want to talk about security. Okay, maybe security issues that people need to be aware of, or how your language handles security better. So I know in that video, Java said that we have better security. Why? Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
No. Java has the worst security. Go to, I think it's called java0day.com or .org or something. It tracks how long it's been since a Java vulnerability comes out.
Cool. So how does Ruby address security? What are some of the security concerns?
Can you interrupt for 1 second? I think when you talk about Java and security, and a lot of the security vulnerabilities that are out there aren't with the language or with the web frameworks. It's with the plugin, the browser plugin.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. So there may be a difference between a Java. Are you talking about applets?
Applets, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so there may be a difference between a Java applet, which really are not very common nowadays, especially with HTML5 and but from a language perspective, is there any sort of security related stuff that Ruby addresses or that people need to be concerned with?
Well, not to be too geeky, the language is just the abstract syntax that you're using. It's the implementation of the language that typically has the security defects. I mean, I could talk about the security functions that Ruby or Python has to allow you to write secure code, but most of the time attackers aren't going after vulnerabilities in your code, they're going after vulnerabilities in the interpreter. And that varies based on interpreter to interpreter. One of the things to consider with Ruby is native extensions. Like I was talking, when you use that C code in your Ruby application, you get those nice performance gains, but C is much less safe than an interpreter. So anytime you bring in C code to get performance boosts, you increase the likelihood that you're going to have a security vulnerability. One good thing that Ruby has that very few people use is there's this notion of taint, where you can basically assign a degree of trust to an object. So if an object is marked with a high taint value, high integrity, security critical components in your system can't access it until you do certain things to clean it up. And so you can use taint as a mechanism to make very secure applications. People typically don't. But like the big YAML vulnerability that came out recently with Ruby was based on the fact that it was bringing in C code. There's a lot you can do to make your app have crummy security, not sanitize your inputs, but the language and the interpreter usually can't help you. It's up to you to do your job.
Okay. And so I know that you said that C has a problem with security, not necessarily a problem with security, but when people are writing C, that a lot more burden is placed on the programmer in order to properly manage memory, etc. Is that something that Ruby developers have to be concerned with as well?
Well, I think most programming interpreters are written in C at some level. Java's written in C, Ruby's mostly written in C. So yeah, it's absolutely a big concern. You've got to do your memory management correctly, and that's why a lot of people who are great at language are scared to death of writing code for the language itself. That's what the Rubinius project's about, is writing a Ruby interpreter in Ruby so the best Ruby programmers can contribute to the project.
So writing Ruby in Ruby?
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Andre, he mentioned sanitizing data.
Yeah.
Right. Is there things that people can use in PHP in order to address that easily when they get user input to enhance the security of their applications?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, PHP is a double-edged sword, and that's one of the problems that inexperienced developers might encounter when programming PHP, is that they don't take into consideration to sanitize their inputs. Like I told my students in my last class, never trust the user, ever. But there's a number of functions available for PHP that will sanitize strings, validate email, validate with regular expressions, that'll help to protect yourself and your database built into the language. So it's nice that you don't have to go about figuring out ways to do that yourself when it's available for you with a function call.
And Joe, anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, I mean Django and Rails is similar, has so many different layers of protection. I mean, the request object itself is completely escaped. Django has built-in cross-site request forgery protection, SQL injection protection, script injection protections, and none of the configuration aspects of any sort of a Django implementation are exposed at all, you can explicitly expose them, but natively they're not exposed, to the browser, so no one can get to them. And the database itself, I mean, your models have layers of validation, so you can say this field can only accept this certain input, but then the database can also have a layer of validation to prevent a different type of object from getting in there, and then hashing passwords, all of those types of things are easily done inside native Python and Django.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Two parts. One, how does each language handle garbage collection, and then libraries and the availability of useful libraries?
Python does a pretty good job of garbage collection. You don't have to have a wrap-up function that disposes of all your variables and closes all your objects. There's a great, and I think Ruby has a with command as well, a with statement that lets you specify an object that really must get closed, and everything inside the with statement can utilize that object, but by default when that with statement is finished it will automatically close, especially a file stream or some sort of an open object that you really must be sure to clean up and close. So garbage collection is not something you have to think about on a heavily regular basis. When you get into multi-process and multi-threaded applications, it gets a little bit more interesting. But you'll know what you're doing when you get to those levels.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
What was the other? You said
libraries.
Oh, libraries.
Oh, so like Gem, I don't know what PHP has. I'm hoping you're going to tell me.
Yeah.
The Python has something called, what used to be used as called easy install is now called pip. Pip is the new and better version of easy install, and there's a it's pypi.org is the place where all Python packages get published, and you can pip install those the same way you can gem install or npm install or aptitude install. So it's a great way to review and view the source code repositories for plug-in Python packages.
Now, to answer your question about garbage collection, as you said, PHP works in the same way. Now, I'm not too entirely sure about when you start passing things by reference and maybe setting null of those references afterwards. I actually did that in one of my examples, so I have to test it out. Maybe get an answer to you later, though. And as I told you, for packages, Composer is the go-to for PHP.
Ruby uses what's called a generational garbage collector. Ruby's garbage collector used to suck, but one of the nice things about Rails is that it brought a lot of attention and people started caring about performance. Ruby, the different implementations of Ruby all have gotten really good at garbage collection, and Yarv does the bytecode compilation. So there's a lot of things that have been done to optimize the way it handles memory. It's still not, I don't think any of these languages are particularly kind to your RAM banks, but the Ruby's is about as, I don't see how they're going to get too much better in terms of garbage collection and the ability. One thing you can do is you can trigger, I think all the languages allow this, but if you're smart, you can look for downtime and trigger garbage sweeps, and that helps a little bit too. In terms of package, one of the more frustrating things about Ruby is you go to try to come up with an idea for an open source package, it's there.
The name is anyway.
Yeah, and so there's very rare circumstances in which I'm looking for something that I can't find 7 things that I have to read people's blogs on which one's better and why. So.
The challenge with that, though, with any of these languages is anyone can publish a package.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't talked about Node.js, but most of us are getting into doing some things with Node.js. I know Andre is. I'm not sure about you, Tom, but one of the things in packages, and it's especially now true in Node because there's the dependency tree is so much deeper than it is for Ruby and Python, and I think even PHP. But you can end up with an application that has 17 dependencies of packages that you really have no validation as to whether or not they are useful, will be maintained, have bugs in them that are going to cause you to lose a weekend or a night of sleep tracking down a bug in someone else's package. So as easy as it is to install packages and just get a drop-in piece of functionality, that's one word of caution I would give developers is, it's easy to just install the 10 things that you need and then use them in your app and say, okay, I've built an application. But when you deliver some production code, a production application, you really have to make sure that you've pared down those dependencies, rewritten the things that you should really have control of yourself, anything that's critical, and then made sure that the packages that you do leave a dependency with when you produce are going to be around and you know them well enough, and better yet, if you know their authors and their community.
might be worth noting that math and science is big in Python too.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
So it's sort of the
They
default
use it
for
CERN
math
or
and
something?
science community, because some of the packages out there are really good for doing all that stuff. It must attract math and science nerds.
And it's Google's default language, and Dropbox and a number of others. So it's pretty badass, even though it doesn't have the cachet, of some of the others.
Yeah, so it may not be as sexy as some of the newer ones, but it's around and it's mature. So don't forget that you can please vote for your language. You can go to codetalk.couch2code.com and vote. It looks like Ruby was taking the lead. It's about half an hour ago. So
I tried to vote for Python, but it wasn't working. My block. My block.
Was there no Python button there? Awesome.
Log one for me.
So I do. We've got about 15 minutes left. I do want to be able to have the opportunity for you guys to talk about your code, because I want people to see the differences, and I want people to see this. I don't know if we'll have time to run them and test them, so maybe let's just talk about them and then. But I think it would be helpful if we could at least maybe run a Python or PHP just to show people what that whole process looks like, and maybe you guys can walk me through that. So I'm going to open up 2 or 3 gist. I thought I had the other one, Andre, that you sent.
It should be both in that single email. PHP gists. Yeah.
This one here?
Yeah, one's this is the procedural style. It's just a function. And
Well, Joe, do you mind going first? We'll start with Python here. Can you guys read this, more or less? Let's see if I can.
I have a lot of comments in there, which it's not. What, can you copy that and put it into a REPL.it?
Oh, sure.
Because the syntax is commented.
Okay. So REPL.it.
Mm-hmm. And choose Python.
Choose Python.
And then hit the play button. It took the indentation off.
Oh. Okay. So let's can we explain that real quick?
That's what I don't like about
Python. Tom really likes this. So one of the things that I think that I found that blew me away coming from other programming languages was that indentation is syntax in Python. You do not have brackets. You do not have end statements. You simply have indentation. And to start a function or a method or start a class, you end it with a colon, and then you indent by a consistent number of characters. And then when you end that indentation, you've ended that block. I personally find that to be enormously elegant. It blew me away that actually existed and was decided for a language. But it results in, when you're copying and pasting and moving things around, if your copy is not, if you don't have tab characters, they're actually space characters, you may have those things sucked out when you paste.
Well, and right now it makes it difficult because I don't know what's nested within what unless I go back and syntactically check which indents are there. So it is elegant during the development, but if you do lose those indents through a copy and paste or something, it can make it very difficult. So does that look right to you? Hold on, I think so.
Just use an IDE.
Yeah, you got to go.
Chad, isn't there like a raw? There's a gist.
Oh,
go to the raw.
Well, I think I nailed this here.
There's a bunch more. Oh, you think you got it?
And Python does allow curly braces for people like me, so you don't have to do the
You can do it if
spaces.
you want to.
You can do it if you want.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's like Ruby and
while he's indenting. So one of the great cool things about Python is what's called list comprehension and list slicing, extended list slicing syntax. So essentially you can take the text object, which we lowercase, and then say C for C in TXT, which basically takes every character out of text like an array and slices it into an individual variable. But you can apply an if condition, which in this case you use the built-in Python function is alphanumeric. So what we come up with is a list, an array that has a single entry of every character in the text that you pass in that is alphanumeric, meaning no spaces, no underscores, no dashes, no punctuation. So that's the first thing we do to determine the palindrome. We can also use regex and slice out everything that isn't from A to Z or 0 to 9, and we've lowered it so we don't have to check for capitalization. And then when we want to reverse it, this list slice syntax is pretty wicked. You do start, stop, and step, and if you leave off the first two, it's just going to go backwards through the string. So you make a copy of it. And so we can also reverse it if we make a copy of the list and call the in-place reverse method and combine them by using joins back to a string and determine if text A is equal to text B1 and text A2 is equal to, if they're all equal to each other, we output that it is a palindrome. And then we can print all of these variables that we've used in a simple nested method, which I think is kind of cool, to go through and find any variable that contains list or text and output it so you can see what those variables look like in computing the result of the function.
Awesome. So let's hit play, see if that works. Okay, so it looks like it did work, right?
Yep, so now you can, is palindrome capital P.
And then do I...
in quotes, put in the text.
And then say something simple.
Yeah, and then hit comma true, capital T.
Like that?
Capital T. Python uses capital booleans. And hit enter. So there's the list values, there's the text values, and Ala is a palindrome.
Cool. Okay. Do you have any questions on that? Okay. So I think some of the interesting things here is that he did a really good job of using some of the Python special sauce that it does for working with arrays and character lists, things like that, iterating through, reversing them, and I think it's a very elegant way of extracting. So that first, where you say C, 4C, and text is a really elegant way of extracting all the special characters and spaces for detecting if you have a palindrome. So that was one of the, if you have a palindrome, it doesn't really take consideration spaces or periods or semicolons, things like that. So that's a really interesting method and a good use of Python for doing that. So, does anybody have any questions on that? Cool. What's that? Yeah, so we did a simple palindrome, A-L-L-A.
Put in your camel one or find another, put in a long one.
Okay, let's see.
The length shouldn't matter, just the special character is the interesting part.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
the one that he put in his email had some special characters in it.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's see. So you can see Chad is obviously not a palindrome. And we can do a larger one with some special characters. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. Right? I think that, yeah. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. Yep. Good job. So you can see what it does. It takes out each of the characters of that array, and it creates them, and then it just makes sure that they're all the same, and it's able to detect if that's a common. So awesome, good job, Joe. Thank you. Cool. All right, next up, Andre.
All right. So it's my palindrome procedural style, and yeah. What I'm doing here, I'm just pretty much, I went crazy with it and just did as much PHP things as possible. So here's our input array of palindromes. That's a palindrome, that's obviously not a palindrome. I'm defining a constant because what I'm doing is I'm converting the string to UTF-8 in case there might be a special character. So if you like input maybe like alt17, you're going to get all those wacky characters, right? What I'm doing here is down at the bottom, if you go down below, keep going, all the way. Yeah, it's pretty long. I'm calling is palindrome passing an input, right? So we pass it to the function. Normally in PHP, it's a copy by value, but what I'm doing, if we go back up to the top again, please, to the very top of the function call, I'm passing it in by reference, by appending the ampersand on there. So what that's doing is I'm actually pointing to this value in memory still, all right? And I'm also using some type hinting here, being like, hey, it's an array. Initialize a local variable result. Check if is an array, which is really nice. I really like that. There's really great functions for type-related functions in PHP that allow you to work with things like, check if array key exists, or has key, or array splicing and merging, stuff like that. So if is an array, then we go through, else I throw an error. Then I pass my input to a for each loop, And again, I'm doing it again, passing by a reference, because this would be another copy of the value. So we have that reference of the string. I convert it to UTF-8. I split the strings into a character array using string split. I initialize another local variable, string reverse. Now this time I'm using a for loop, and what I'm saying, I decrement from the end of the array to the beginning. Why? Because that's why. No particular reason. It's supposed to be faster to decrement, isn't it? I think so.
I like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's in JavaScript. I don't know about PHP.
So I set it I equal to the length of the character array. While I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. What I'm using here is called the ordinal, or which returns to me the ASCII value of each character. So I'm assigning that to a local variable code point, pass it through a switch case statement. Now what I'm reading, if you go to like ASCIItables.org or something like that, you'll see that capital A through Z and lowercase a through Z are between 97 and 122 and 65 and 90, I believe. And what I do is I use the unset to remove that value from the array if it is not any of those. At that point, if none of these cases are evaluated true, then default I push the character into my reversed array. So right now, currently it's going from the end of the array counting to the front, right? So if you go down, and like I said here, I could have easily used string reverse to reverse a string, but what's the fun of that? And I have two more local variables: regular string, which I join the string array together with the empty, just an empty character, and then my reverse string, I just join that with the reverse string. I use PHP's string case-insensitive comparison function, and what that will return is if I believe this string is not equal to this string, then it's greater than 0. It's the other way, then it's less than 0. But if they're the same, then they come up to 0. My result was an array, so I pushed the key, which would be the 0 index, and I assign that as an associative array. It's a string with the string on there. The result, holy crap, it's palindrome. Else, put the string in there. Nah, man, there ain't no palindrome.
All right, guys, do you think we should test this, or do we believe them?
Test out.
Come on.
All right, yeah, that's what I say too.
Do you have a map on there, or?
I have PHP.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Is there a PHP interpreter in?
5.5, 5.5.10.
Let's see.
Oh, and a couple things to point out. Yeah, so shorter array initialization syntax, I'm using like the square brackets like JavaScript instead of just saying array curly braces, which is really nice to have.
Spin that out a little bit. Will that work?
Move it over some.
Oh, PHP 5. Will that work for you, Andrew?
Yeah.
5.11?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Good.
All right, so PHP. Okay, so
VI, nice.
yeah, quick and dirty. All right, so how do we run this, Andre?
PHP, just temp PHP. Yep.
Okay. Whoa.
Oh, it just spit out the array. So.
Oh, it did it as
a string. Yeah.
Shoot. Hold on. Where's the where's the raw? I think what it did is I've got this pre in there.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. Shoot. Where's the
Go
raw?
over to the right. Isn't there over on the right is raw?
So download this.
That one?
Do that.
Okay.
Just save file. All right. So let's just do this. Okay. So what did it download it as? Gist. Okay. So you can do PHP gist, right?
Oh, it's a tar.
It's a tar.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
All right, we'll do this quickly. Gist. Okay, so CD gist. Okay, so now we'll do PHP palindrome, right?
Yep. And it's still going to do the same thing.
Okay. Huh. Well, looks like it's got some functions.
I don't know if codepad.org has the latest 5.5.10, but you just give it a whirl. I might throw an arrow there.
Well, yeah, the formatting is off with the HTML, I think, but Is it? Does REPL.it have a?
No, it does not.
PHP? It doesn't, unfortunately. So it's putting.
Make sure you got all of the beginning tag at the top.
I wonder if it's maybe these little characters here. But all right, well, we may have to take your word for it, Andre, and move right along to Ruby.
I think
just so we make sure we have enough.
I think you copied the entire opening PHP tag when you pasted that.
Oh, did I not?
There's one character.
Just VI and go to the top.
Okay. So, VI in the palindrome.
No, the one you just created. The template that you just.
I don't know where it's at.
I have another example.
I believe it works. It looked functional to me.
well, let's move on to Ruby. I definitely want to give Ruby an opportunity to do this, and I'm sorry with that this is not functioning right now. But let's do Ruby, and then.
Are you going to do my cool one or my simple one?
Well, I had them open,
public
but now I
sense
don't
and
trust
stuff?
myself. So let me see if I can get you. Let's see. Where did you send those? There we go.
I'm glad I didn't say anything mean in my email.
I know. There we go. Okay.
No, not that one. Let's do the other one if I can.
The other one.
The simple ones, I didn't know how much time we have, but everyone else did a better example. So
Text Wrangler should have some nice syntax formatting for us. Right?
Do you have MVim?
I do.
MVim would be, you can show off MagVim. No.
Oh, you ran tests.
Let's try opening it.
Yeah.
Text Wrangler here for downloads and palindrome. I think that should have some syntax. There we go.
Yeah.
Maybe get a little bit bigger here.
Okay, so I guess I'll stand up, come over here. So this is kind of cool. I'm trying to bring in Mocha. So this is done with unit tests, because everybody, if you're going to use a typeless language, you've got to do unit tests. The compiler serves the purpose of doing your unit test for you in a lot of cases if it's strongly typed, but dynamically typed, you just got to have unit tests. So I'm setting up some unit tests. I'm trying to use this mocking library called Mocha, but if they don't have it, I rescue it. So you can dynamically change your code based on what packages the user has on their box. So if you run this, he probably doesn't have Mocha, but the code will still run. And so, so the goals, we already talked about all this stuff. So anyway, I made a module. So classes do inheritance different ways in different languages, and the way Ruby does inheritance is they have these things called modules. And modules are classes that can't be instantiated, basically. So I've got a module that does all the things you would need to do to detect if you were a palindrome or not. And so I've got this method here called palindrome that takes some preprocessors and an optional code block that is a character selector. And I've got some stuff up here, adder accessor. This is basically automatic scaffolding, so you don't have to say preprocessors equals and define how to add it, and then get my preprocessors. This automatically generates your getters and setters for you. So what I'm doing is I'm going through each of my preprocessors, whatever they might be, and I'm sending it to my object. Now send is special in Ruby. Normally when you have a function, you have to write the function in your code, but Ruby is so dynamic you can actually send it a method. So in this case, it's actually going to send downcase and strip as though they were calling res.downcase, res.strip. A lot of times this is bad practice in coding because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, but there's good reasons to do it, and it's fun. So we do it. The next thing we're going to do is if someone passes in an anonymous code block, a lambda, a closure, whatever you want to call it, it's going to go into this character selector variable. And if it is, what we're going to do is we're going to go use this select method, and we're going to go through and we're going to see if it matches that character selector. And so what I've got is a framework for detecting different types of palindromes based on someone's definition of whether they want to ignore white space, whether they want to ignore special characters and whatnot. And then I call this special private method called underscore pal, and this is my own idiom. A lot of people don't do this. I like to do underscore to mechanize private, essentially. And then I've got this neat little thing here. I like to unit test my private methods, so I've got some more meta programming. So if I pass in test to the command line, this is not private, so I can unit test this. So I can make it private in production, public in unit test, so that I can test my private code. And this is really cool here. There's this method, we'll get to it in just a minute, but here I'm defining a method called each, which allows me to iterate over each character and uses the special yield keyword to return one character at a time. And this is really, really important for the way I implemented this, because we're going to see in a second. Right here, I include enumerable. Enumerable is this built-in module in Ruby that does a zillion things for you, but in order to use enumerable, you have to implement the each method, because enumerable calls each. And so I want to make my string enumerable, which annoyingly in Ruby strings are not enumerable. So I define each, and now I include enumerable, and I'm going to get select, which I used up there. If you remember up there, I used select, and basically says if this block returns true, keep it. If it returns false, throw it out. So now I get to use select, which is really cool enumerable method for free just because I implemented each. And I'm also bringing in my Palindrome Detector into the string class. So I'm monkey patching string. String's built into Ruby. I'm changing string to behave the way I want it in my app. So now here are my unit tests that all pass, I assure you. This is a good example of test-driven development. You start with some really simple unit tests, and they fail, and then you go write the code. The way I did this is I just went and wrote these simple code pieces that allowed it to detect that foof is a palindrome and foobar isn't. And then I added some specialization to handle capitalization and white space, and those were those two default methods that I used as preprocessors. And then I show how this demonstrates that if you pass in test, foo's not private, and if you don't pass in test, foo is private. So this shows the private methods, and this is another example of introspection. Here I show how if you override those default preprocessors, you can change the behavior of your palindrome detector. If I only pass in strip, then it fails because of down case. If I only pass in down case, it fails because of strip. But if I use those defaults that it used in the beginning, it passes. And then down here, I have a long one that's got crazy stuff in it. And now I'm passing in my anonymous block. Remember I had that character selector that I passed into select. I've got a block. I could have used a regex, but what's the fun of that? So I pass in 3 different things. If the character falls into one of these, it returns true. So that select is going to use this block to determine whether each character meets our particular requirements. But someone could rewrite this block to do whatever they wanted it to do to detect whether it met their palindrome goodness. So cool. These tests all pass. We can add other ones, or you can just run it, or we can just trust me.
No, sorry. Yeah, we'll try to run this. Hopefully it'll clock this. But I think that's a really good example is including unit tests. I think that demonstrates all these languages do support unit testing, and that goes into a whole other thing of programming is automated testing and test-driven development. That kind of whole mantra of a big part of Agile is actually testing. And this automates a lot of that. So you can test your code during development, which is very helpful. And all these languages do support this. So let's see if PHP...
Because you're a little short on time.
Yeah, it's not going to run on the web.
No, you can definitely run on the web.
It'll have to
I'm sorry, I'm looking for PHP.
Make sure to go to protalk.couch2code.com if you want your phone right now. You can vote, see who's winning. I think Ruby is still winning. Ruby fans.
Yep, put in your final votes.
And then Ruby is 6, Python is 6, PHP is 2.
All right. Well, let's see if we can break the tie. Don't make me the tiebreaker. Come on.
Ruby's not going to work on this, so you're going to have to run it locally.
Oh, am I?
That's 22.
Yeah. All right, let's do that then.
Can we get all this on our GitHub page too?
Yes, yeah. So we'll create a GitHub repo and we'll put all the code out in GitHub so you guys can download it and run it yourselves as well.
Just run ruby palindrome.rb and it should work.
Is it ruby-v? Is that what you need?
That'll be great.
Okay. Ruby palindrome.
I've never tried that particular. Yep, that should do it.
Okay, just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then.
Not by Mocha. Nope, gem install.
Oh, I need gem install Mocha.
I wonder why this version doesn't catch that.
It should.
That works on
rescue
mine.
module,
Yeah, because I had that catch. Just go delete the Mocha thing and it'll work.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So.
Like with all interpreters, when they change versions,
Well, I mean, welcome to so what do you want me to delete here?
just delete all of that. All that block after. Yeah, delete that. The rescue, the put s in the end, and you're good.
Okay. Again?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So 5 tests, 8
Okay.
assertions.
All right. All right. So what we did here is because he put in his automated. So remember with Python how we had to put in our string, we had to think of strings to put in our different tests. He actually automated all of that. So our program itself is what put strings in and let us know whether those tests passed or not. So I think this is a really good example of that for Ruby. So thank you very much for showing us that.
Thank you so much.
So thank you guys. Yeah, these panelists are very smart. I mean, they obviously know what they're doing real well. So I thank you very much for your time
And
today.
if you want more and you're excited about it, CodeCamp. We've got PHP right now starting out with Andre in a couple weeks. Python is coming very, very soon, and Ruby will be starting with Robert Pierce at the end of May. So feel free to sign up for those classes. In June, we've got AngularJS, Ember.js versus Backbone.js. So keep it on your calendars. May, we're doing a Winning the Talent War, how to get your best team lined up for your company to be rock stars. That's pretty much it. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.